Hi, I'm Chuck Leavell, piano player with the Rolling Stones, and you are watching Noise11.com. Pretty cool.
And we welcome to Noise11.com Chuck Leavell. Welcome back to Australia.
Thanks so much,
You've
Paul.
done a few trips down here.
Yeah, we have. We were counting the other day. I think 5.
Okay.
Which is wonderful. We love coming here.
Well, you've got a magnificent career that we're going to talk about, and there's a number of hats, including musician, ranger, and also educator. And we ought to start off with iRockU.com, which is a magnificent educational initiative that you've been part of putting together. Actually giving people a platform, music fans a platform, to go online and learn how to play music with you as the teacher.
Well, it's been a lot of fun to put it together, Paul, and my partner, Howard Citron, has done a marvelous job of on the technological end, putting it all together. It is a website-based instructional video for piano, and the way it works is, first of all, we have to properly license all the material, which a lot of sites don't do, and it's really important that the songwriters and the artists get paid for what they've done. So, for instance, Rolling Stones songs, Honky Tonk Women, or whatever it might be, we've licensed through the proper publishing and gotten all the necessary clearances. And then I pick the songs, and then we work with a group of really talented young players from the New School in the New York City area, which is a school devoted to the arts. And these kids are just brilliant, brilliant players. And they do most all the instruction under my supervision. And we, of course, have the camera angles where people can see the hands on the keyboard and other angles so that it's very clear. We have notated music as well as occasionally we have MIDI files for the students. And it is a subscription service, so people sign on and pay X amount of dollars either per lesson or per year, depending on how they want to do it. And it's been successful. We're growing, I wouldn't say by leaps and bounds, but we're growing very steadily. And one thing to point out is that in America, a lot of the funds for education in the arts in general have been cut. And so we see this as a way to help fill that gap, where kids that really want to learn the piano can do so via this vehicle. One final thing I'll say about it is that we've had a very successful meeting with the New York City music school system teachers. We had about 130 teachers to attend a seminar that we did in New York, and that was incredibly successful, and we're hoping to partner with them where we would give them accreditation to teach our method throughout their school system. If that catches on, then we may get other school systems throughout the state and throughout the country, which would be great.
Would the end result of the education that you get through iRockU that you eventually end up with a degree?
Well, the way it works is we pick a song, let's say Honky Tonk Women, and we have 7 different levels of instruction. So if you're a complete beginner and you're struggling, to learn, we have a very, very simple version of instruction for that song. Level 2 obviously goes a little bit more in detail, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So by the time you're in level 7, hopefully you're playing it pretty much like Chuck would be playing it on stage. And we find that to be a good way for students to grow. It gives them a chance to be confident in whatever level they are before they move to the next level.
It's interesting, the song selection. How does a song like Honky Tonk Women teach a beginner? What are the basic ingredients of a song like that when you're learning and starting afresh, that you go to a song like that?
Well, it's pretty interesting because most folks out there that follow the Rolling Stones know there's actually no piano on the original recording of Honky Tonk Women. But when I came into the band, I guess maybe I put a little signature on it, and so now it's kind of one of the playful songs that I get to do on stage with the band. But I guess to answer your question, it has a lot to do with my own personal style and how I would approach not only that song but any given song. And, we've been able to include some songs that I've known for the Allman Brothers Band, for instance, or Eric Clapton. And we go beyond just the artists that I've worked with into other artists and other songs. But they're all pretty much rock and roll tunes that we're talking about here. So, and I think the people that are interested in playing instruments these days, that's kind of what they're looking to do. They want to be in a band, they want to have a local band, or maybe they want to eventually go professional. So that's the service we're trying to provide and promote. And
it's also for international, global. Anybody from anywhere in the world can sign up.
That's the beauty of the web. All you have to do is go to iRockU.com, and that's the letter I and the word rock, and then the letter U.com, and you'll see all about how it works within the system. And you're right, man, it makes it so easy for anyone in the world to jump on and take these lessons.
Well, that's Chuck Leavell in 2014. Let's take it back to the 1960s and that teenage Chuck Leavell with Marshall Tucker Band, Wet Willie, Charlie Daniels Band in the studio. What an incredible time and an incredible place to do it in.
Paul, I've just been so fortunate in my career. I count my blessings each and every day, and it's been one heck of a journey for me. I started out literally by learning the instrument from my mother, who was not a professional or a teacher, but played for family enjoyment. I was the baby of the family. She would get me up on the stool and show me some things, and that's how I began to learn. But then later in life, when we're talking about probably age of 12 or so, my cousin played the guitar, showed me some chords on the guitar. We became interested in folk music of the day. Artists like Chad and Jeremy and New Christie Minstrels and Bob Dylan, of course. And so we were playing folk songs, and then rock and roll came into the scene, and British invasion in particular. And so, as a young person, age 13, I had my first band called the Misfits, Misfitz. And they were, the guys I was working with even back then were good players. The bass player was the son of the professor of music of the University of Alabama, where I grew up in Tuscaloosa, where the University of Alabama is. And we were all, for young folks, pretty serious about being good musicians, and we practiced on a regular basis. And so as time went on, we even had our own Saturday morning television show. When the first television station came to Tuscaloosa, they wanted to mimic Dick Clark's American Bandstand program, and they hired us to be the band for that. And we had a local disc jockey, for a radio station that was the DJ, was the MC for Tuscaloosa Bandstand. and it just became an enterprise for us. We had a steady gig every Friday at the YMCA playing for the kids, and we would learn whatever the songs were popular that week. And I think I mentioned British Invasion was a big part of that. Stones, Beatles, Zombies, Dave Clark 5, Herman's Hermits, and all of that. But of course, there was also indigenous music of the South, rhythm and blues, country music, soul music, Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett and James Brown and all of that. And we were trying to absorb all of that. And then, going forward beyond that, when the Misfits eventually broke up after, 2 or 3 years of a nice run, I began to seek out the best musicians in town to work with. And fortunately, I was able to do that, and eventually do a little bit of work up in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which was a hotbed of recording, as you know. And then eventually to Macon, Georgia, where Capricorn Records was founded.
Right. And then one of your old bosses, Dr. John, was in Australia earlier this year. It was a pleasure to sit down and talk to him when he was here as well. Yeah. Tell me about working with Dr. John in the early 70s.
Well, what happened was we had started our career in Macon, Georgia with Capricorn Records with an artist named Alex Taylor. Alex was James Taylor's elder brother, and more of a honker-shouter, soul blues guy than, what James and Livingston and the other Taylors are like musically. And we had toured with Alex for a couple of years. We had done a record with him. Actually, that was the first major U.S. tour that I did. We were all over the country. We were even up in Canada and just all over. We traveled in a Ford LTD station wagon with about 6 of us in there, very long drives, and my introduction into the real world of touring in that way. Well, what happened was the band that was backing Alex up, when we came off the road, Alex wanted to stop touring for a period of time, and Phil Walden, who was the president and founder of Capricorn Records and also managed a lot of artists, including the Allman Brothers band, had signed Mac, Dr. John, Mac Rebenak, to a management contract. Mac had just recorded In the Right Place album, and Right Place, Wrong Time was beginning.
Big hit down here. Yeah.
Exactly, and all over the U.S. Well, he needed a band. And so after Alex quit touring, the same band that was backing him up auditioned for Mac, and luckily we got the job, and that's how it came about. This would have been probably 1971, I believe it was. And, what a pleasure for me, man. I played mostly organ with Mac. Obviously, he's the master New Orleans pianist. But every now and then he liked to play guitar and would jump over and I'd play the piano. But I learned so much from Mac. I call that period my college education. He was just such, and we remain to be really, really good friends. As a matter of fact, just recently, this year, earlier, about 4 months ago, we did a tribute to Mac in New Orleans at a beautiful theater there with all kinds of special guests. I was in the core band to back everybody up, including Bruce Springsteen, who did Right Place, Wrong Time with Mac. The Neville brothers were involved. Warren Haynes was there. Just a plethora of great artists to pay tribute to Mac. And that will be made into a DVD and a CD and will be released at some point. They're working on that now. But I think they called it the musical mojo of Dr. John. And he's been a mentor to me. He used to call me that little organ player, Chucky, that little organ player. And fortunately, as well as being in the core band on this tribute, I was also able to be a featured artist and do a song in tribute to him. So it was a wonderful experience.
I had the pleasure of watching Chuck perform last night at the Cherry Bar in Melbourne, and one of the pieces that you did was Jessica by the Allman Brothers. Are you aware the Allman Brothers have never toured Australia? Greg was down here earlier this year, but had an accident with his hand, and Melbourne and all of the other shows missed out. We didn't get to see him at all. So Jessica, I do believe, was probably played live for the very first time by somebody actually involved with the song last night in Melbourne at the Cherry Bar.
Well, we had so much fun last night at the Cherry Bar. Thanks to James Young and Brian Wise for helping with the program. It was just so much fun. And for the fans for coming out, we appreciate each and every one of you. I know it was sad that the brothers never played Australia. It's, I guess, just one of those things, the cards never fell in favor of them coming over and doing it, either when I was with the band or after I left the band. And I did hear that Greg had come here, which is great, and I also did hear about, some of his unfortunate problems with his hand. So, but as you know, just in recent times, in the last, it's been a week or so, the Allman Brothers Band played their last concert at the Beacon Theater in New York, where they're known to do an annual string of shows there, and they've done that for decades. Sometimes I've been able to go up and involve myself and sit in with them through the years. But it was Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks that announced earlier this year they would be leaving the band to pursue their own interests. Warren with Government Mule and the other projects he does, and Derek with his wife Susan Tedeschi, and to follow that career. And I don't blame them. I understand. They're both doing very well in those respective bands, and they want to pursue that. They've had a good run with the brothers, and I think probably the rest of the guys, Greg and Butch and J-Mo, were like, we have to replace two guitar players that have been with us for a long time, do we really want to do that? Maybe now's the time to bow out gracefully. So I think they did that. Here's to them for whatever pursuits they have. I think Greg will certainly continue on with his solo band, and maybe he'll get back to Australia.
You came in with the Brothers and Sisters album, I guess.
That's right. Try to give you the short story of it, and that is that I had moved to Macon, Georgia. I had worked my way up, working with Alex Taylor, with Dr. John, doing some recording sessions with various artists. You mentioned Marshall Tucker Band, Wet Willie, and Bobby Whitlock was on the label for a while, Bonnie Bramlett, and others. I was fortunate to be on those records. And Duane Allman had his unfortunate accident on a motorcycle and died in 1971. The band went out without a replacement as a 5-piece unit, which was a very emotional and a very gutsy thing to do, and the right thing to do, because you just don't replace Duane Allman. But they came back off of that tour emotionally drained, ready to take a break and do something different. Greg wanted to do a solo record. I got called to do that record, which was called Laid Back. It became a very popular record in the United States. Not sure how it did in Australia, but it was very popular in the U.S. And during the course of making that record, there were these jam sessions that went down where Dickie Betts and J-Mo and Butch, the drummers, and Barry Oakley, who was still alive at the time, bass player, would come down, and after hours we would just go for it, and have fun and pick a key and play. And these sessions began to become pretty interesting, these jam sessions. And after about, 2 weeks of this, I get a call from Phil Walden, the manager of the band, and said, "Can you come in for a meeting?" And I thought, "Oh God, what did I do wrong?" And I go in for the meeting, not knowing what it was about. I thought it was just meeting with Phil, but I walk into the room and there's all the guys in the band, and a few pleasantries go down, and then the shoe drops, and Phil said, "The guys have asked to have this meeting because these jam sessions seem to be going really, really well, and they like what's happening. They want to know if you'd join the band." So that's the way it happened. And yes, Brothers and Sisters was the first project, and that came immediately after recording Greg's solo record, Laid Back. And I had just turned 20 years old at the time, so it was quite a step for me to join such an established band, and one that of such talent and creativity. I mean, the Allman Brothers pretty much defined Southern rock and changed music from that part of the world significantly.
Yeah. Eric Clapton plays a part in this story as well. You were telling a very funny story about the Unplugged record last night, to the point where I had to go home and pull the record out and put it on and play it again this morning, just to hear the story of chocolate milk.
Yeah. Well, if you want me to repeat it, I'll try to do it quickly. But after we got home from the Steel Wheels tour with the Rolling Stones, I had a message from Eric, who was a special guest on some shows at the Steel Wheels tour, for me to come play with him at the Albert Hall. Well, that started the relationship, and within a year or so, we did the Unplugged record. And on that record is a song called Alberta, Alberta, and as you know, this was a live record, all acoustic, and Eric, I guess, got happy with whatever I did on the song Alberta, Alberta, and he calls out my name at the end of the song. In his English accent, you hear Chuck Leavell. So during the interim period when the record had come out and we were waiting to promote it, I was doing a little media tour on behalf of environmental issues and forestry, which I'm very involved in, as you know. And I was on the phone to this woman who was setting it up, and she said, "I just love that record. I just got it, and I want to tell you how much I enjoy it." "Well, thank you very much." And she said, "My son really likes that record too." "Nice, okay, thanks." She said, "And my son really likes that part where Eric calls your name out." And I said, "Wait a minute, how old is your boy?" And she said, "He's 6 years old." I said, "Well, my goodness, please explain to me why in the world a 6-year-old boy gets excited when he hears Chuck Leavell." And she said, "Because he thinks Eric says chocolate milk." But that was an incredible experience working, not just with Eric, but obviously Eric Clapton is Eric Clapton, but the band, man, Nathan East on bass and Steve Ferroni on drums and Andy Fairweather-Lowe on guitar, Tessa Niles, Katie Kassoon, the singers, Ray Cooper on percussion. And in the beginning when I joined, Greg Fillinganes was the primary keyboardist, and I was sort of secondary. Greg eventually wanted to resign, and he had been with Eric for a long time. He wanted to go back and produce records and do sessions in Los Angeles. Eric came to me and said, well, what do you think? Should we get another keyboard guy, or do you want to have it on your own? And I said, I wouldn't mind having it on my own for a while. I was kind of like a coiled up spring, because Greg had most of the solos, and he did them brilliantly. But this gave me the opportunity to step out a little bit more.
Right, and Eric, an incredibly generous person to the point where he actually loaned his entire band, including himself, to George Harrison, and that was the band on the Made in Japan album from 1991.
Yeah, man, what an incredible opportunity. Again, growing up in Alabama and having those bands and playing British invasion music, of course that included Cream, and it included certainly the Beatles. And so when Eric more or less threw the gauntlet down to George, because he sort of got on George's case about the fact that he wouldn't tour, you do a record once every 2 or 3 years, but you never get out there and play for the public, and you should do that. Why aren't you doing that, George? And George's response was, well, I don't have a band. I wouldn't know where to start. And Eric says, well, I've got a band, and you can have that, and you can have me. So it was kind of like, how do you refuse, right? And we put the rehearsals together in London. Absolutely brilliant. It was such an honor and a pleasure to play with George. I mean, he was always my favorite Beatle growing up, and I loved the mysteriousness of him. And I also loved and respected the fact of his humanitarianism. He was the first guy to do a big benefit, the concert for Bangladesh, for a humanitarian cause. And he was just that guy. He was so wonderful and so sweet, and always happy and smiling. He had this marvelous chuckle that I can hear in my head, when I think of George. And what an honor, man. It was a great band, and to play all of those wonderful George Harrison songs, Isn't It a Pity, and While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Little Piggies, and Here Comes the Sun, and oh my heavens, it was just incredible.
I'm kind of guessing Old Brown Shoe, Piggies, I Want to Tell You were the very first time George ever got to perform those live.
Probably,
So were never performed by the Beatles.
No, that's right. Old Brown Shoe, for instance, good example. That's a pretty deep track, as they say.
That was a B-side, I think, of one of the singles in the later years.
Well, it was such a joy and such a pleasure, and we begged George to bring the tour to the States, and for whatever reason, he didn't want to do it, and it's unfortunate, because I would love for the American fans, and here in Australia, I wish we could have gone around the world.
Oh yeah, I actually interviewed George after that album came out. He was very vibed up at that point because the Japanese tour had gone so well.
Yeah.
He was talking about bringing the tour to Australia. He said he was going to go out on a world tour, but then the anthology happened.
Yeah.
And he was sidetracked, and I guess that was it. We
never
ever got to see a world tour.
Never got to do it again, but thank heaven that it happened, and we were able to do it and at least bring it to the fans in Japan. And of course, there is the live record that is a result of it.
We talked about teenage Chuck, 20-year-old Chuck, and let's get on to 30-year-old Chuck, where I guess you thought you were all washed up and the career was over, and then this phone call comes, which leads you to the job that you've continued to have to this day.
Well, yeah. I had my band Sea Level for 5 years, and we had done that many records. We had moderate success, but success. But that came to a close, and the band broke up, and I was kind of floundering. I had a little trio playing small clubs, not really much happening. My wife had inherited some land from her grandmother, and I had become interested in land issues and environmentalism and forestry in particular. and came home one day a little bit despondent to talk to her about these issues, and said, I'm fascinated by forestry and really want to learn about it, and music career is not really doing much. Maybe I should just, not quit music, but focus on forestry and just see what happens, and yada, 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 go on about this. And she listened, of course, very patiently, and at the end of it she said, well, that's all good and interesting, but guess what? The Rolling Stones called you today. And wow, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, I thought she was joking at first. And she said, no, I'm serious, Chuck. Here's the phone number. Go over there right now and call. And I got on a plane within 36 hours and went for an audition. And I've had the chair for 32 years. So,
there's been a few promotions along the way. You're officially the musical director of the Rolling Stones now.
Well, the way that's come about is through the years when we have rehearsals, I'll take a lot of notes about what song we rehearsed that day. Did we change the arrangement from the record for any reason? What keyboard did I play on it? Were there background vocals? If so, who sang what? Were there horn parts? If so, what were those parts? Blah, blah, blah. And I'd make chord charts for songs. And I began to compile all this and put it into a notebook. Well, the notebook grew and grew and grew until it was this thick, and then it became a second notebook, and that one grew and grew. So I've got sort of these two Bibles, if you will, of Rolling Stones rehearsals. And through that process, through all these years, I guess I became a little bit the go-to guy when the guy said, what was that arrangement we did? Where did the solo come before or after this second chorus, and what key was it in? Even basic things like that. And so they threw some responsibility my way through the years. And I love that role, because let's face it, playing keyboards with the Rolling Stones is not exactly like you get a lot of soloing, you get a lot of opportunities to stand out and do your thing, in that regard. But the joy that I have is keeping track of all those arrangements and being as good a support system as I can be on the keyboards. And of course, there are songs where I get to step out. So, it's not like I never get to do it. But that's what makes the term musical director so satisfying for me.
You also put together the set list with Mick Jagger.
Well, that started, I think, in 1989 when Steel Wheels came about. It was sort of the reinvention of the Rolling Stones. The band had not toured in 7 years at that time, and it was very, very critical to make sure we did a really great show. And we had a long rehearsal period for that, and prior to that, the tours were pretty much the same set list every night, and I went to them and said, my God, you've got this incredible body of work, let's go a little deeper than the same thing every night, open it up where we can trade some songs in and out, do different ballads, and throw a deep track in occasionally. And so I began to work with Mick on that. We would have meetings before and during the rehearsals, and I would give him my thoughts on songs that the fans would find interesting. And through that process, we began to work on the set list together. So that's kind of the way it works. I'll write up a set list. Well, first of all, we have an outline of what we think the show should be beginning to end, where we can drop it down and do a ballad, where we can do some medium tempo things, so on and so forth. So there's an outline, and then within that outline, we give each other thoughts of what songs we could do in these particular spots. And it seems to work pretty well. I would love to see it go much deeper. It's difficult because the fans, a lot of fans that are, let's say you got a group of 50,000 people come to see the Rolling Stones. Probably 3/4 of those have never seen a Rolling Stone show, so they're going to be really disappointed if they don't hear Satisfaction or Jumpin' Jack Flash or, some of the iconic songs the band's known for. The other percentage, 25% or whatever it may be, of the hardcore fans, they want to hear Can't You Hear Me Knocking and Lovin' Cup and, Tell Me and all the obscure ones. So it's very difficult to find that balance. I mean, we work hard to try to do that, but, at the end of the day, you really want to satisfy a lot of fans that are coming for the first time.
Well, Lovin' Cup in Perth the other night was a very interesting inclusion. The band had only done it up to that night 22 times.
Yeah.
And a couple of times with Jack White.
Yeah, that's right.
At the Beacon Theatre.
At the Beacon Theatre during the Shine a Light
Yeah.
film that Martin Scorsese did. So. But yeah, it's. I said this last night at the Cherry Bar, but for me, the most fun times with the Rolling Stones is during the rehearsals, because you're learning some of those songs or going over them that rarely make it to the stage. Sometimes, some cases, never make it to the stage. And there's also these jams that go down. You know, Keith may kick in a Muddy Waters song, or he may kick in a Chuck Berry tune, or you know, it could go any kind of way. And those times for me are the most enjoyable with the Stones, because you're in a room together. It's just you know, it's just the band and the crew, and playing those songs are just a real joy. I wish they could all come to the stage, but you know, you can't make that happen. But we do our best to have a balanced set list every night.
What's an example of a Rolling Stones song that you do rehearse that never makes a set list?
Oh my goodness, that never makes the set list. Well, I can think of one that rarely has ever made it. It made it a few times in Steel Wheels, two of them actually, 2,000 Light Years from Home, and She's a Rainbow.
We had She's a Rainbow down here at one point, I think.
Yeah, perhaps, but very rare. I mean, you'd have to go look at the data, but I bet that song hasn't been played more than 4 times, 5 times, something like that. I'd have to get my notes to find ones that have never made it, but again, for me, those rehearsals are just pure joy.
Yeah, I'm fascinated that the world thinks of the Rolling Stones as an English band, but really, you know, apart from the 4 main guys out the front, you're all American. Every single one
That's,
of you.
That's sometimes overlooked. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, no, but it is definitely a British institution. You know, and that's as it should be. You know, when you go back to the beginning, that's what it was. And 5 guys that wanted to be the best blues band in London, and then the best blues band in the UK, and then the best blues band in Europe. You know, that's what their starting out goal was. And then, of course, when I think it was Andrew Loog Oldham, one of their managers, kind of locked Mick and Keith in a room and said, "You're not coming out until you write a song." And that just led the band into a whole other direction. I think that song was As Tears Go By. And
not a bad first effort.
Not a bad first effort. But the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, and you know, like when I think of Daryl, who's with the band, Bernard, Lisa Fisher, what a voice.
Oh yeah, and it's really great to have this team that has been in place for a long time. You know, I've been with the band 32 years now. You know, Bobby Keys, who unfortunately couldn't make this tour due to some health issues, has been there about as long, or maybe even longer, as Ronnie Wood. You know, and of course Bernard and Lisa that you mentioned have been since '89. Tim Reese on sax now has been 16 years with the band. So it's really cool because we know each other so well now, and it's like we think as one person, and it's a very tight band, and you know, I hope it keeps moving forward.
How is Bobby? Is he getting better?
Yes, the news that I've had is very encouraging. You know, he's getting better day by day. He was in a rehabilitation facility for some health issues that he had, which I think, you know, internal organs. And he's coming out of it, so we hope to have him back should we move forward next year. I don't know if the band's going to do anything or not, but we all love Bobby, that's for sure. Love you, Bobby. We miss you, man.
Brian Wise, our good mate, mentioned last night a very interesting thing, and I've thought of it many times, about why the Stones have never done a blues album. And, you know, I went back and had a look at... you know, I think on Emotional Rescue, there's Down in the Hole. You know, even on Bigger Bang, there was Back of My Hand.
Yeah.
There was a very obscure song that I discovered when I was going through a couple of old singles this morning. The Storm.
The Storm.
Yeah.
There was also Fancy Man Blues, which is another one that we did early on. And, of course, the covers that they've done through the years, Little Red Rooster and Mannish Boy and all of those things. But before I forget, getting back to Bobby and the sax players, I do want to say what a great job Carl Denson is doing.
Oh, yeah.
Carl came in for this particular tour, great sax player from San Diego, recommended by Lenny Kravitz, and Carl has just done an outstanding job, so good on him, as you say.
Yeah.
But the blues thing, yeah, man, are you kidding? I mean, would that be so cool just to do, whether it's blues covers or songs that they've written or would write in the blues idiom? I think it would be brilliant, but it's not my call, unfortunately. I'm sure it's been mentioned and thought about with the main guys in the camp, and who knows, it could happen. So keep your fingers crossed.
We've covered so much of your career, and thank you very much for going through what you've done over the past 40 years. Very quickly, John Mayer is another person that you've worked with recently.
Yeah, what a brilliant singer, songwriter, performer, guitar player he is. And I got the call kind of out of the blue, although I'll say that John opened up for us on the Bigger Bang tour on some shows. And I made it a point to go meet him and congratulate him on his artistry. And so a little over 2 years ago, the phone rings, and it turns out that John had requested to see if I would do some recording with him, which I jumped right on. Went to New York. We did the Born and Raised record. I was going to tour with John in 2012 behind that record. A lot of the folks out there remember that he had a problem with his throat. He had a granuloma in between his vocal cords. And he had been treated for it and thought that he had overcome it. And we all gathered in Los Angeles, started production rehearsals. We were into the 4th day of it, and he could feel something was wrong. Went to see his doctor, and his doctor said, "I'm sorry, but it's back, and you're not going to be able to tour." So the whole tour was canceled. Big disappointment, but we had to deal with it, and it was worse on John than anybody, bless him. But anyway, time goes by, he's treated again, he gets over it, and then calls me back to work on the Paradise Valley record, which I thought was a really, really good record. And recently called me back again just before this tour to come to Los Angeles and record with him. So, he's just a wonderful artist, and I love his work ethic. He's always writing and just masterful musician, and hope that other opportunities with John come up.
He sounded fantastic on a couple of the shows he did with the Stones on this tour.
Yep, absolutely. When we did the European section of the tour, he did 2 shows with us, Pink Pop Festival and then the Circus Maximus in Rome. And John and I had dinner together before the Circus Maximus gig and had a great chat, and he sat in on that show with us, I think on Respectable, the song Respectable, and he's also joined us on stage in the U.S. A few times. So hopefully there'll be more guesting with him up the road.
I'll tell you who else sounded fantastic, and another mate of ours has been down here many, many times, Gary Clark Jr.
Oh, yeah, Gary's just an amazing player, and his career is really doing well. So, and even once we had both Gary and John at the same time on stage. Now, that was... what would you Guitar Palooza, I guess.
Yeah, that was pretty special that night.
Man.
Yeah,
it was very good.
Yeah. Chuck Leavell, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for sharing the story here at noise11.com.
Pleasure to be with you, Paul.